So we are starting today Halachot of Challa, and I chose the topic first because we were discussing what topic we should learn. But there's a segula. Some people like to bake on the first Shabbat after Pesach a challah shaped like a key. Right? So there's many of the segulot of the ideas don't always have a source. Then you try to find sources, and somehow they become from a few communities doing it to everyone does it, especially when you have social media and everyone shares on Facebook or TikTok or whatever you have, or WhatsApp on the status on the WhatsApp. They share the picture of the challah you have, and it really becomes a thing. So this week is the thing of baking challah shaped like a key. Unfortunately, we don't have here challah. So we'll learn a bit about Hafrashat Challa, and first we'll also maybe explain a bit this custom of baking challah like a key. And as we think it might have simple questions, simple answers. We know you take 1.5 kilos, whatever it is, 2 kilos, 2.2, bake challah, separate it, and then burn it, and that's it. There's actually quite a few interesting questions.
As soon as
I'm
I
not even sure
can.
we'll be able to discuss all of them in this week. I'll give you just a question that could very well be: do you take challah from a cake? Well, usually you don't bake a cake with enough flour, right? Let's say you do a kiddush in shul, and you bake a lot of cake. Or wedding cake, right? A wedding cake. You have a huge cake in the base. Okay, in the army base, they usually have trays of cakes. You take challah. So that's the question, which could very well be. We could meet it every now and then. We have smachot. Let's say you have a kiddush in shul, and you have a few neighbors who each one brought their own cake. All of the cakes together, they put it on one big table for a buffet, and all of a sudden you ask, 1 second, I have here a lot of cake. Do I need to take challah or don't need to take challah? Matzah. How do they take challah from matzah or don't they take challah from matzah, from the handmade matzah? So we just finished Pesach, right? Sufganiyot. Do you take challah from sufganiyot or no? When we were in Shlichut in Memphis, so the Bat Amigos of Not Shehut, they did, I'm not sure how many kilos of sphinxim, They had a huge pile of sphinxim in the end of the day, and everyone ate as much as they wanted. For all the school, 200 students. Do they take challah from sphinxim or don't they take challah from sphinxim? The question which could be we could meet them quite a bit. Kugel Yerushalmi. You make a big pot of Yerushalmi kugel. Okay, so if you make a small pan, that's fine. You make a big pot of Yerushalmi kugel. Do you take challah from it or don't you take challah from it?
That's another question then. So that the Yerushalmi kugel is made from noodles as opposed to from the flour, as opposed to all those other things you mentioned that are made from flour.
Yeah.
So that's another.
Yes, that's another question. That could be another question, which that for sure will not touch today. Let's say you ate a lot of Yerushalmi kugel. That's your lunch, okay? You were teasing your wife about baking challah, and she said that, you know what, you aren't eating, find a place to eat. So there was a kiddush in shul, and you said, I'm eating a lot of kugel, or just you love kugel, so you ate a lot of kugel. And then afterwards you said, 1 second, what bracha should I say on that? Hamotzi or mezonot? So that'll be a question for next week. There's quite a few questions on challah that we don't even think about them sometimes. So it's a good opportunity to learn about it. I have a question. I think that we touched in the past, but that hopefully we'll touch also today. Let's say we decide all of us together, we're a group of men here, and we are doing a revolution. Not just challah baking for women, also challah baking for men. Okay? So I bring it somehow became the challah bake became like a very woman thing. There's a reason for it, but it became a very woman thing and a woman event. In the base, a few times I baked challah with soldiers, and many times I was asked, "Can also men take challah?" Also men take challah, and so used to the fact that it became like a rabbanit comes and have a whole discussion, an emotional and spiritual thing about it. So a man can take challah, and also a man can light candles for Shabbat. If his wife isn't at home, or if he lives by himself, he can light candles for Shabbat. And he can also take challah, although it's a mitzvah more for women to do it, but if also a man can do it.
The matzah thing is interesting. I mean, besides the fact that most of the boxes of matzah say that challah has been taken, when we set up these portable matzah baking factories, I'm sure you're using the minimum portion.
Yeah. So how do you bake? We'll also hopefully discuss hopefully today how do you take challah from matzah. But they say we have 3 kilos of matzah, 3 kilos of dough. Okay, we took flour, 3 kilos of flour. That's for sure the amount of flour we need. And then each one makes his own challah with his own shape, his own key, and takes it home. So
what is the symbolism of the key? You mentioned this.
we'll mention it soon. The symbol of the key, okay? And do we take challah? Can we take challah if you want to? So hopefully all of that we'll learn today, and if we want to finish everything, so also next week. But first, let's explain the key. Okay, where does that key come from? The Gemara in Ta'anit, okay, the beginning of Ta'anit, says that Hakadosh Baruch Hu has 3 keys. Maybe I'll read the Gemara. Find it fast. Rabbi Yochanan says that Hakadosh Baruch Hu has 3 keys that he never gave to messengers, or never gave 2 out of the 3 to messengers. He gave to someone the ability to decide, but only 1 key at a time. The key for rain, the key for giving birth, and the key for Tchiyat HaMetim. So in Eliyahu Navi, he wants to stop the rain, so he took the key to rain. Right? And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, you have to give the key back if you want to bring back to life. And the Marav Amrei, also the key of Parnasa. Also the key of Parnasa. And many times we actually connect Parnasa and rain with each other. They're very much connected, especially in the past, but even today, if there's a drought, here, there's not so much wheat growing, and there's not so much fruit. So rain and Parnasa are very much connected. Maybe there are 2 sides of the same coin, okay? Especially in the past, but also I think also today. I think most of the wheat in Israel is grown by rain without any watering, I think. I'm sure also in the States, most of the wheat is grown just from rain. What? Ukraine. And that also just depends on the rain. Yeah.
Other places might
In the States, actually, there's a question about Hadash. We want to touch it now. Hadash, new wheat, and that's because some places can have wheat all year round, but that's not a topic for today. When is the time that Hashem brings blessing to the fields? The Omer, when we bring the Omer. When's Korban HaOmer? Korban HaOmer is the beginning of Sfirat HaOmer. Right, beginning of Sfirat HaOmer, the 2nd day of Pesach, or the 1st day of Chol HaMoed Pesach. That's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we start we can see already the grains of the barley, and that's when we pray for Parnasah. That's also the end of the season of the rain, right? Because the day beforehand, on the 1st day of Pesach, we switched from Morid Mashiva Chumud HaGeshem to Morid Hatal. We stopped from rain to dew. And so we stopped from rain, so maybe we moved from rain to Parnasa, okay, to wealth. So that's the Skula, because remembering that Hashem, He gives us the key of Parnasa, everything comes from Him, the key of, so people bake a challah in the shape of a key. Okay? And I guess after Pesach, in any case, everyone needs to bake. Everyone who doesn't want to eat matzah, okay, needs to bake. So everyone's baking on that Shabbat. So I think that's how the minhag of baking a key-shaped challah came for that Shabbat. That's now we learned about the key-shaped challah. Some people put a key inside the challah, but it's the same idea. Understanding that the blessing, the key of the blessing comes from Hashem. Even if we are great chefs and we know how to bake, in the end, it comes from Hashem. So that's the idea of this custom. And now let's go to Challah. Okay, so it's in Yoreh De'ah. Up to now, most of the halachot we've been learning were from Orach Chaim. We are now in Yoreh De'ah, Siman Shin Kaf Bet, and we'll be skipping between the Simanim. But let's start from the beginning. Says the Shulchan Aruch, I'll read it inside. Mitzvat Aseh, there's a mitzvah from the Torah. Mitzvat Aseh, להפריש תרומה מהעיסה. Challah is called a truma, something that we lift up. Okay, different meanings for it. We won't go into it now. But it's lifting up. B'litna lekohen, and to give it to the kohen. So there's 2 aspects in this mitzvah. First is separating challah, and second is giving it to the kohen. Okay, I'm saying it's 2. Some will say it's 1. just for us, it's two things. Why I'm saying it's two things? Let's say I separated challah and I didn't give it to the Kohen. It got lost. The challah separated. Can I eat the rest of the challah? Yes. Okay, so there's two parts to the mitzvah. And לפסוק שנאמר, ראשית הריסתכם תרימו תרומה. Okay, that's the pasuk. וראשית זה אין לו שיעור. The ראשית, this beginning of the dough, which we give to the Kohen, a truma, doesn't have a measurement from the Torah law. It reminds us, I'm not sure how much we're familiar with the halachot of trumot u'maasrot. The trumot u'maasrot, we have 2 trumot and 2 to 3 maasrot. If we learn it, I'll explain why between 2 and 3 maasrot. The truma goes to the Kohen. That we have a truma gdola and trumat maaser. The truma gdola, it can be a very small amount. Even 1 grain can be fine for a huge pile of wheat. חיטה אחת פותרת את הקרי, as Chazal say. So 1 grain is enough. Chazal said, take a nice measurement. Give a nice present to the Kohen. Don't be greedy. Okay? Help the Kohen. He depends on you. You depend on him. He teaches you Torah. He teaches your children Torah. He gives a spiritual meaning to the nation. So don't be greedy. And Chazal said, give him a nice portion, more or less 2%. The same with challah. Midoraita, it's enough to take even a small amount. If I have a huge dough, I'm baking here, having communal bake, and I had 10 kilos of flour, I can give a small amount to the Kohen, and that's fine. Chazal said that a regular person who bakes at home should give 1 out of 24 to a Kohen. 1 out of 24 to a Kohen. The poskim asks, why is it 1 out of 24? But a very maybe simple idea is that 1 out of 24 from the minimum amount of challah works out to be a nice amount, enough for a small meal. And if he's a baker, and if it starts taking 1 out of 24, that's already too much, and the prices will go up. Allah said, 1 out of 48. Okay, so for the Torah law, 1 out of whatever it is, a small portion. From Chazal, when we bake, we should give 1 out of 24. And when in a bakery, 1 out of 48. Okay, and Chazal says, okay, how much do we give today? How much do we give today? Have you ever watched your wife baking challah, separating challah? Okay. So the shach brings that in our days we give out 1 out of 48. Okay, because the challah is tme'ah, we don't give it to the Kohen. We give 1 out of 48. Okay, 1 out of 48. If you look around, how much challah does it take? No one measures and gives 1 out of 48. We more stick towards the Torah law. Okay, so we try to give something which is about an egg size, more or less, maybe a big nut, the size of a walnut, or an egg, but we don't never measure, and we give, that's what we take, because in any case, we burn it, we don't do it with anything, we burn it, and there's no point of taking a big portion and burning it. So that's the minhag today, to give 1 out of a small amount, okay, to take it out. The Shulchan Aruch here continues, and that's the question. Here I'll ask you a question. Challah, is it a mitzvah which depends on the land? Does challah depend on the land? Trumot u'maasrot depends on the land, right? Trumot u'maasrot depends on the land, right?
Challah in America, so it must not be dependent.
So they take challah in America, so maybe it does not depend on the land, right? They don't take challah, they don't take trumot u'maasrot in the States, right? So do you think, does challah depend on the land? Well, so you say no. So without knowing the halachot also, I would say no. Very simple. Does challah grow in the land? I mean, when are we obligated to take challah? When we do the dough, right? When you make the dough. When you buy your flour, did you ever check where the wheat was grown? You ever check where the wheat was grown, right? Do you check where the wheat was grown? No. Okay. We just take challah. By the way, if you use wheat, and that's I think it's called Gvaot Olam. Sometimes we used to be like very particular about the flour we used. They have great whole grain wheat. Also fine, also tasty, and it's grown in Israel. So challah actually does depend on the land. That's an interesting halacha. Challah depends on the land. And not like other mitzvot that depend on the land. That the question is, where did the producers, where did it grow? Here the question is, where did you make the dough? So I can bring wheat from China, grind it wherever I grind it, make the dough in Israel. That's called challah from Israel. So that will be chayav mideoraita. Almost, we'll explain it in a moment. If I take wheat from Israel, bring it out to the States and make challah there, there's no, it's from the Torah law, there's no challah. Okay, so challah depends really where you make the dough. So very soon maybe we'll give a spiritual explanation for that. Chazal said, one second, Am Yisrael went on galut. Now everyone makes challah. Everyone makes challah. And they know that everyone makes challah, and people will go back to the land of Israel and will forget that they need to separate challah. So Chazal said, even now in Chutz La'aretz, you have to separate challah. So challah in Israel is midoraita, challah in out of Israel is midrabanan.
Okay. They don't say that.
Hey, don't say that about truma. I think the reason because truma you can really you know that it depends on the land because you pick it from the tree. But challah, since what makes it obligated in challah is when you make the dough, you don't think so much about the connection between challah and the land. And also I think another reason is that not everyone has fruit trees. But challah, everyone makes challah, at least in those days. Okay, I think even today, it's more common for people to bake their own bread than for people to have a lemon tree in the house. Okay, so, and also in those days, it was like that. Now, the Shulchan Aruch says that today in Israel, there's no challah midoraita, even in Israel. Okay, it's still a different level than Chutz La'aretz and out of Israel, but then in Israel, there's no challah midoraita. Why? That's interesting. We need to have rov yoshvei aliyah, most of the Jewish nation living in Israel. If most of the Jewish nation isn't living in Israel, so there's no obligation of challah midoraita. That is the question. I heard a few times questions about it. How many Jews are there in the world? How many Jews live in Israel? How many Jews live out of Israel? It's a good big question. How many Jews live in the world today? Depending who you ask, right? Who knows? Well, who knows exactly? How do you count? It's very hard.
Especially because so many people that identify as Jews are not Jewish.
Identify as Jews, they aren't Jews, unconverted. Maybe their parents also married out. What happens if their mother married out? They don't identify as Jewish, but they are halachically they're Jewish. So we have many, many questions. So we don't know. But what happens if we know that most of the nation lives in Israel? That changes a lot of halachot. It might change shmita. It might change a lot of halachot. So one of them is challah. So challah, for it to be midoraita, we need to be in Israel, and also most of the Jewish nation, they need to live in Israel. Why is that? Why is that? Why? What's the connection between Israel? I mean, dough, you can make the same dough everywhere. Take the same recipe, make it worldwide. What's the difference between a fruit grown here and grown out of Israel? By the way, with peppers, I checked that. I went today to buy peppers, and I saw the peppers were grown in Israel. I saw the weren't so great peppers, and then I realized that the good peppers, like many of the good fruit, they exported. And I did once, I'm not sure if I told you, but once I did an experiment with my kids. We were in Memphis, and they brought peppers from Israel. And everyone was going on, be careful, be aware, don't buy the peppers from Israel. You might be obligated to do truma to masrot. It's a question, yes, no, if you need to do truma to masrot. Yeah, so that's the same with me. I would say, what? How could you say don't buy peppers from Israel because you might chas v'chayila do a mitzvah midoraita? So I went to the shop. It was Friday, quite late on Friday. I looked for the peppers from Israel. Unfortunately, there was only one pepper from Israel. I took the one pepper, took Trumot Masrot, made a video about it, shared it with the community, so they learn how to do Trumot Masrot, and then on Motzei Shabbat already, because I didn't have time on before it was Friday, on Motzei Shabbat, I told my kids, yeah, you have 2 yellow peppers, one from Israel, one out of Israel. It was the last pepper in the shop. It wasn't the best looking pepper already. So to close your eyes, I'm going to give you a piece of pepper. Tell me which one is the Israeli one. And amazingly, they recognized the taste. They said that the ones from the Memphis had less of the taste. It's more like round, sweeter. So that's
You're in the store, how do you know that it's an Israeli pepper?
It says on it. It said, yeah, and it says it's marked. They had a small sticker on it, on Canada or Israel or Mexico. That's new, I think. I think that's new. In the States, you pay $1.50 for a pepper. So each pepper has a sticker on it. right? Here it's just by.
And also here, the tomatoes, the ones without the leaves are the ones that come from overseas.
Yeah.
The ones that are on the vine are the ones that come from Israel, because we cannot import the
leaves,
and
whatever, yeah.
and the vines
Yeah.
from up.
Okay, so we learned about Challah, we learned about what's from Israel, what's not from Israel, what's Chayav, what's not Chayav. We just said we'll give the spiritual or maybe meaningful explanation about it. Why Challah? What's so important about Challah? Why do we take the mitzvah of Challah and say, that's such a great mitzvah of Challah? It's a basic food. Bread can be sometimes the most physical thing. Someone who wants to eat, oh yeah, chasing your bread, when you go next to the pizza store here, especially after Pesach. Wow, what a smell of pizza, right? And when you bake, I used to learn in the yeshiva next to Merkaz, Ni Angels. I used to walk in Jerusalem and say, wow, you can smell sometimes from tens of meters, maybe kilometers sometimes, depending on the wind and the day. You say, wow, that's such a great smell. And then you become hungry. I realized when you go, I'm not sure if it's still like that today, when you go into Angel, they have a fan just at the entrance of the shop with blowing the smell right into you just before you go to the shop. And then you become, I want to buy something which tastes so nice. So anyway, so dough can be like a really, really low food, like the way like animals like are eating on one hand. On the other hand, challah has something very human in it. Think how it is to take wheat and grind it, and which you take wheat, which you can eat wheat as grains, and then you grind it. You can't really eat it, and then add water to it, and then let it dry, and then make challah. There's a lot of thought and knowledge in how you do it. So that's already, we're uplifting something from being more of an animal level to a human level. And by taking challah, separating challah, we're even lifting it to a higher level, to a holy level. We are joining the Kohen. The Kohen is part of us, part of our meal. We're giving him a present to eat. So we're going to be part of a meal. And the ability to take the physical world and bring it into a spiritual world, that's only in Israel. In the Chutz La'aretz, we can do a bit of it. We can imitate Israel. We have Challah midrabanan, rabbinical law. But really to do it, that's the ability we have only in Israel, and that's why maybe a spiritual meaning for why Challah is in Israel. Okay, let's continue. There is a difference between Challah and Israel and Chutz La'aretz. We won't go into it. What happens in the questions? Spekot. Do we give it to a Kohen? Don't we give it to a Kohen? We're not going to go into it. Let's go to basic halachot. I'm sure most of that you know. How much flour do we need to have in order to separate challah? So we calculated by an omer. Okay, omer. We learned from the man, asrit hayefa. The measurement is an omer, asrit hayefa. And then we have a question: how much is an omer? Which is after Pesach. An omer is 43 eggs, more or less. Okay, a bit more than 43 eggs. Okay, great. How much is an egg? An egg is between 2 and 3 kazaites. Machloket between Rashi and Rambam. Great. How much is a kazait? Like this matzah or like this amount of matzah, right? So there's a question of how much is an omer. Therefore, also we have a machloket between the poskim. How much chalash will separate? Right? And if you take 2.2 kilos of flour, we measure it by flour. It's actually really supposed to be by volume. Okay, it's supposed to be by volume. And when the flour, then there's also a question. When you buy flour, what happens after you sift the flour? It gets bigger, right? It separates a lot of air between the small pieces. So it's right, you have all of a sudden more. So when you say a volume of an omer, is that sifted flour? Is it dense flour? How do we measure this amount of flour? We use today weight, although it's for sure not a measurement of weight. It's just much easier for us to measure by weight, okay? Because we don't start now checking weight. Volume after baking, when it's sat under 5 kilos of flour, so we just measure weight. 2.2 kilos for sure. You say you take challah with a bracha. Okay, that's for sure. We have the halachot between the grach na'eh and the chazon ish. How much is exactly kabeitza? 2.2 kilos for sure. You take challah with a bracha. If I'm not mistaken, in the States, the OU says that more than 5 pounds. It's more or less 5 pounds. In Israel, many poskim say more than 1.6 kilos already. That's omer according to the grach na'eh. And that's many poskim hold like the grach na'eh. more than 1.6 kilos of flour, you can take challah with a bracha. And between 1.2 or something like that, so you take without a bracha. That's, I think it's unique only to Israel. From what I saw, I didn't check of all the poskim in the States, but the common halacha in the States is more than 5 pounds, 2.2 kilos more or less.
1.6 kilo is 3.5 pounds.
3.5 pounds. But I think the reason between the difference between the States and Israel is that, as we mentioned, challah in Israel originally is mideoraita. So we go by the Grach Naeh, who says 1.6 kilos. And out of Israel, so for sure it's midorabanan, it's a lower level than Israel. So with a bracha, we have to say, okay, take it for bracha, you have to have the largest amount of flour. Okay, we measure it by flour, and we measure it by flour. So if I take flour and then mix it with water, the measurement goes by the flour.
Okay. Back to your other examples when we came in here for the cake and
for the cake. Okay, for example, the cake. Yeah.
People make pasta from scratch.
Right. So pasta. I can see that we won't finish everything this week. But for example, cake. Okay, so cake is a great example. Cake usually how much? I don't bake cakes, so I'm not sure how much flour you put in a cake. Okay, but a regular cake, I find hard to believe you put more than half a kilo of flour in. No? Unless you're baking for an army base. 2 full cups, that's much less than half a kilo, right? So even if the cake itself weighs 2 kilos, let's say I'm making a big cake, but I measure the flour inside it. Okay, I measure the flour. Let's say I make brownies. Brownies hardly has any flour inside, okay? It mainly has junk. So if I'm taking, okay, don't quote it because I love brownies, okay?
Flour with Pesach brownies,
that's some very good ingredients.
But they have a lot of sugar. What's the most? Okay, so after we'll swap share recipes. So let's say, but brownies don't have so much flour in them, right? So if I'm making to take challah from a brownies, I have to have a huge amount of brownies, okay? Because we measure the flour. We measure the flour. We'll mention here halacha, which will hopefully next week a bit go more into it. We take challah only from something which is supposed to be baked. We won't discuss it so much now, okay? But only say if I'm making pasta, for example, and it's pasta, for example. So pasta, we don't take challah from pasta. If I'm making homemade pasta and I'm making a large amount of homemade pasta, I don't separate challah from the pasta. Okay, so it needs to be baked. We'll get a bit more into details about it next week, Be'ezrat Hashem. There's interesting halacha here, but since we don't have so much time, so we won't go into other halachot. Just that interesting halacha, although it's not so common, not so relevant. If I have a mixture of flours, so if the flours all from the 5 grains, I take chiffon and kusmin and mix everything together and make it one dough, for sure I take challah. I take half a kilo of chiffon, half a kilo of kusmin, half a kilo of wheat, and then half a kilo of barley. I have more than enough. I separate challah from it. Let's see if I have rice, flour from rice. Okay, and I mix it, what? Or almond flour, and mix it up together with. So if there's no wheat at all in it, so for sure you don't take challah. Okay, there's no wheat at all. If you have mixed wheat inside it, if it has a flavor of the wheat, you can taste the wheat. So says the Shulchan Aruch, you separate challah. You separate challah. If you can taste the wheat, you separate challah. Not only that, even if you take how do you call that? The machmetzet, the one that you wrote, sourdough. You take sourdough and mix it with flour from rice. Okay, just flour from rice without any other wheat, but you can taste the sourdough. So according to Shulchan Aruch, you separate challah from that. But we'll have to end here.
Because that's such a small amount.
Yeah. No, there's no amount there. So we'll end here next week. Yeah, but you still stay separate challah because you can taste the dough. The will continue next week.